Welcome to the Dave Palma Show, the podcast that revives, restores, and awakens your innermost capabilities.
You have the training and the talent to succeed, but do you have the guts to fail?
I love what I do. When you love what you do, you want to be the best at it.
Today is about the power of you. You will change the world.
Find your path to success through the journey of those who have succeeded. And now, your host, Dave Palma.
Hi, welcome back to the Dave Palma Show. And with me in this episode, I have an economist, professor, and author of the book, Adjunct Capitalism. Hunter Hastings, welcome to the Dave Palma Show.
Dave, thank you very much. It's a delight to be here. Good to meet you.
Pleasure to have you. Always good to have an academic on my show. And of course, I'm a politics graduate at the University of London. So I didn't study economics like you, or not in the economic side, but of course I know the politics behind it, which obviously there always is. But I'd like you to tell me more about your book, Adjunct Capitalism, and probably where that stands in terms of capitalism today.
Yes, be delighted. I'm not that much of an academic. I've worked a lot in the real world.
Oh, okay.
So
all right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about that first, because I thought perhaps you came from an academic background, being an economist and former professor.
No, I was born in England. I studied.
Oh, okay.
Studied economics at Cambridge University. In fact, they have a course they call a tripos, which is politics, philosophy, and economics. So
same as I went to Birkbeck.
Right.
I went to Birkbeck. They did the same.
All combined.
Yes, right. They did the same course at where I did politics, but mine was politics and society. But I could have done PPE. Mm-hmm. They call it PPE, not PPE, PPH. Or whatever.
PPE. Yeah,
PPE. Yeah. So anyway, that corrected me a bit.
Well, no. I worked a lot, and then I've taught in business school and been doing some academic research since then. So a combination, if you like.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's move on to your book, and then we can have probably a little conversation about any debates around capitalism, what people think about it now, really, because it's changed a lot from, capitalism. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
The proposition for the book, Dave, was that we find that young people today are skeptical and mistrusting of capitalism. There's a research company over here called Pew Research that did a survey quite recently that said that only 40% of young people aged 18 to 29 would express a positive view of capitalism, and a much higher percentage would say positive things about socialism.
Yeah.
So you wonder why that is, because capitalism is the economic system that's raised levels of the quality of life and per capita income everywhere in the world for everybody over hundreds of years. So why would you have a bad opinion about that? And it turns out that the negative opinions are about corporations, that they're mistrustful of corporations, that these are, cold, heartless, exploitative institutions, whereas in fact they're the ones that are bringing you all the goods and services that are improving your life. So we looked at a long survey of capitalism over time, kind of brief skid over the top of 200 years of history. And the invention of the corporation was a great boon at the time. We actually start our survey in England with Wedgwood and Bentley, the people who make Wedgwood China. And Josiah Wedgwood was a great innovator. He was a great marketer. He was a great technologist. He improved the quality and the aesthetics of pottery for everybody. A great example of improving circumstances. And then we looked at the big corporations in the U.S. like Standard Oil and Quaker Oats and Singer Sewing Machine. A fabulous invention. The corporations didn't exist until the second half of the 19th century, but then they created scale, mass marketing, mass distribution, mass production in a positive way that brought light to homes that didn't have it. They brought safe, nutritious food. They brought transportation. They brought communication, just a vast array of increasingly quality products and services at lower and lower prices. So the value that was brought to people was phenomenal. that was all led by entrepreneurs, individuals who started these companies, had that vision, had that drive, made those things happen. What occurs over time is the entrepreneurs leave. They die or they retire, and management takes over. And what happened with management is it became bureaucratic. The attempt to control the outcome, as opposed to being empathic about how can I improve customers' lives better. It was more about control of how can I get the results that I want from a performance standpoint, an economics standpoint. So cutting costs and maximizing profits. Nothing wrong with profits, but when you've got the attitude that comes before customers, then your customer quality tends to erode over time. And so we tracked that through the 20th century, and government gets entangled with industry. You had the war economy in the first part of the century. That got transferred to corporations. It became called strategic planning. And you look at big companies like IBM and GE, they had more strategic planners than they had people worried about what the customer quality was being. And so the customer focus of these corporations started to erode. We called the capitalism of the 19th century customer capitalism. That was its driver. And we called the capitalism of the 20th century corporate capitalism. And then the worst version of that is financialization, Dave, where we're focused on the quarterly earnings and the stock buybacks and the dividends and so on. Again, nothing wrong with that, but if that's the purpose of the corporation, it's lost this customer focus. And then finally, we arrive at the 21st century, and the positive trend is that these big digital companies now have a direct connection to the consumer. There's, if you're buying on Amazon or you're talking on Twitter or on Facebook, there's a direct connection. And we hope that will become an influence that will restore the customer focus of corporations. It's not proven yet, but that's the possibility. So that's a potted version of the 35,000 words of the book.
Yeah, it's got some words to go through. I'm with my dyslexia. I like to look at some pictures with it as well to paint 1,000 words. So, but there you go.
There's a couple of pictures in there.
Yeah. I'll probably pull out a few of the chapters. There's 9 chapters, of course. There's the introduction and conclusion as part of those 9. So you've pretty much given a good introduction and summary, really, a synopsis of the book. So we can look at that before we go into any kind of debate. Capitalism before corporations, that's what you mentioned earlier, wasn't it? Where it started in the mid 19th century. Is that? Yeah,
even earlier than that, the 18th century. Wedgwood.
All right.
Wedgwood was started around the time of the 1770s, I think.
Yeah.
The wonderful thing, Dave, is we discovered that a lot of the things that we think are so modern, like marketing and sampling and retail merchandising and so on, that was all the case in the 1770s with Josiah Wedgwood. He invented the idea of putting your branding mark on the pottery, so everybody knew it was Wedgwood.
And that's that idea is still going strong today, isn't it?
That's it.
Branding.
Yeah. Well, in fact, branding is the way to keep trust. If you have a brand that is trusted, the reputation system of capitalism is an incentive to keep that trust, to raise the level of quality with customers. So branding is a positive, very much.
It's like the Nike swoosh or the KFC sign for Kentucky Fried Chicken, it's all brands that will, and you don't trust it if it hasn't got that sign, and you think that's not a genuine Kentucky Fried Chicken, that's Southern Fried,
right?
Someone, or even a Nike, that's a fake Nike. It's not got or something like that. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that's where the branding kind of comes in, doesn't it? And of course, intellectual property and everything else comes with that, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and the idea of branding is very much customer driven. That's a positive. So what does the customer think about my brand? Are the levels of trust going up and down? So branding is a great positive. I work for Procter & Gamble that makes Tide and it's Ivory over here. I think it's Fairy over there. But our customer's mom. We're always thinking about mom and how can we please mom and how can we make mom's life better? But today, when you're the bureaucratic phone company or some other kind of giant bureaucratized corporation, you lose sight of that. There's too much in the way. There's too much bureaucracy that's not serving the customer, but serving its own internal rules. That's the problem that corporations have to solve.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so the next chapter was entrepreneurial ownership, a golden age of corporations. So what era are you looking at with that chapter?
Well, this is 1850 to 1900. And the point about it is, Dave, that entrepreneurship is the driving force of what's good in capitalism. We get that word, a little bit mixed up today. We think of it as small business or starting a business. But actually what it means is the pursuit of new value for customers. That's what entrepreneurship is. And you studied economics. You know that used to be economics, but what changed was government economics, central planning from the top down, worrying about GDP and not worrying about individual customers. But entrepreneurs are the drivers of innovation and new technology and new ways to distribute and market. So those were individuals. Over here, it was people like John D. Rockefeller and Henry Kroll invented Quaker Oats and Sears of Sears and Roebuck.
Oh, yeah.
Over there, you've got the Richard Bransons of the world and so on. People are real entrepreneurs. People are looking for new and better ways to doing things as opposed to bureaucratizing their corporations. So these great companies were started by entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs were their drivers. That was the energy behind them. That was the point. But then entrepreneurs die and managers take over.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, they're pretty much like the inventors, if you like. It's a bit like Steve Jobs. They're pretty much like the inventors. It's a bit like Steve Jobs with Apple, and stuff like that. He'll always be remembered as the entrepreneur that started it, but of course it's managed now in a different way, isn't it? So.
Well, exactly. And that's that succession problem, that innovation management. How do you go from a Steve Jobs to the next era is a great challenge. Apple's done a pretty good job, but there are others who have not.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, some will go sinking down, especially the ones that probably don't keep up with the ever so increasing fast-paced technology industry that's going on now. So if you don't jump on the online kind of marketing and everything else and digital kind of stuff, then you might get left behind as a high street. It depends what business it is, but I know a few, I think there's Thomas Cook. They went down because they didn't go along with a lot of stuff, people doing stuff online, and the other companies got on board with that. Even the airline industries, you can do stuff online with them, but Thomas Cook did it the traditional way and then he got in trouble and it just sunk. You've heard of Thomas Cook if you're from the UK.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's that kind of thing. And they're probably around actually the time that you wrote this second chapter.
Yeah. Well, Thomas Cook himself was a famous entrepreneur. He
exactly, yeah.
kind of invented the travel industry. But that's a great point about the difference, Dave, between capitalism and corporations. So capitalism is that high-speed change. How can we make customers' lives more convenient, make them easier, give them higher quality, give them greater opportunities? Where a corporation like the Thomas Cook Corporation is thinking, how can I defend what I've got? How can I maintain against this innovation that's coming from outside the corporations? That's the balance that has to be struck. And a lot of corporations find it really hard to do that.
Yeah, well, it's all a risk, isn't it? Entrepreneurship is about taking risks, isn't it? Really, business. So their risk didn't work, and they went bust. Simple as that, really. It sounds a bit like a casino, doesn't it? Going bust.
Well, there's risk, but also, as you pointed out, there's change, and what the entrepreneur is able to do is see that change, sometimes lead that change, but certainly keep up with it. Whereas the corporation sees risk and says, I got to defend against that. That's something that's bad for the status quo. So the entrepreneur the entrepreneur will take a risk, but in this context of change and constant improvement and trying to make things better for customers. So it doesn't always work, but the entrepreneur embraces that and goes for it.
Yeah. And then you've got the next chapter, which is the early 20th century. So we're talking about probably up to World War One, I suppose. One step forward and two steps back. How do you explain that?
Well, so the managers took over from the entrepreneurs. That's the theme. And some of them introduced positive results. So we talked about branding, Dave. Over here, we have the big car company called General Motors, and General Motors introduced 5 new brands that didn't exist before and invented a portfolio of brands. So that was very positive. It was decentralized. It was consumer responsive. But the other thing that happened was central planning. So it happened in World War I and World War II, where the government came in and said, hey, you corporations, we need you to produce tanks and bombs and airplanes and uniforms. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to have a central committee that creates the targets, directs the resource, how we'll produce such a lot of product in such a short period of time for such a narrow purpose. And what happened was that integration with corporations and became corporate planning at the end of the 1940s and into the 1950s. So it's that the steps forward versus steps back were big corporations like General Motors creating brands. That's one of the things that they were able to do versus this idea of control and planning and limited production for strict purposes.
Yeah. So Ford Motor Company would be one of those brands with the Ford sign on the blue background, would it?
Yeah, exactly. Henry Ford was a great innovator. One of the things that he did, for example, was double the daily wage of workers at the Ford Motor Company. And why did he do that? Because those workers were also his customers, and he wanted them to be able to afford the cars that he was building. So everybody knew what a Ford was, and in its time, obviously super high market share. Everybody loved it. There was a big transition from, horses and buggies to automobiles. So Ford was a great entrepreneur.
Yeah. I had an uncle that worked for Ford, and he used to get some good discounts. So it's no wonder he always drove a Ford car. So,
well, exactly.
Yeah. So they looked after him. I can't say much more than that. Go on. So we move on to after the war then, so post-war capitalism, because obviously the policy I was doing, I was a member of a trade union. So for me, it would have been all looking at what managers doing and treating their staff and how managers are treating the employees, you see. Yeah.
And that was part of the problem with corporate development after the 1950s. So this idea of central control, and everything has to be planned. Everything has to be to a number. And you start to treat workers as a variable cost. How can I reduce that variable cost as opposed to, the great energy and creativity and application that creates the products of the corporations. That was a ugly period of time, I think, when you had that clash between the management and the workers, whereas a corporation should be a collaboration of both that produces something that's of value for the customer. So yeah, that was a period of time that was very, very difficult from a social standpoint. And it's caused by this bureaucratic management control structure. And so that's the way that corporations drifted. We're learning a little bit how to loosen that, how to manage it better. But it was a problem period. You're right.
Yeah. So, of course, a lot of big changes happened internationally anyway. And I suppose that's where probably a lot of transnational and multinational companies all of a sudden started developing, really. Because with the international system that was developed, obviously United Nations and all the American social sciences, just, the world monetary everything, European Union was kind of started from, I think it was European coal and something. So it all became an international trade kind of method to transnationalize a lot of companies, which obviously mostly came from America, didn't it? Really, corporate America, they nicknamed it, I suppose.
Well, a lot of it, but...
And of course, I'd like to add in there that communism was the biggest threat after the World War II as well. So that is actually the opposite to capitalism, isn't it? Although I wouldn't say China is a capitalist company. I'd say they're more champagne socialists, really.
Well, it's a really interesting development. So, yeah, communism was the opposite of capitalism in the sense that you want the government, the state to own the means of production, and therefore there's no private corporations and all the planning is central. And it turned out not to work, and not to work for the people who are the, supposed recipients of that output. China's a really interesting model where they've separated, to your earlier point, Dave, politics and economics. So yes, it's a one-party ruled state, and we've got a lot of issues with that. But what has driven a lot of the growth in China and raised per capita income levels so tremendously is entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
That's what's going on in China. There have been three waves of entrepreneurship, and they figured out that we'll let the entrepreneurs run their companies to an extent. I mean, some of them, get too powerful and they're reined in, but we'll keep politics, we'll keep government separate from that.
All right. I didn't realize they could.
Singapore had a very controlled polity where you had, one party and one prime minister for such a long time, but a tremendous economic growth through entrepreneurship. So I think there are interesting models separating politics and economics these days that you and I didn't learn about when we were in university.
Yeah, that's right. That's quite interesting, really, because what the communists really looked at in terms of Marxism. But I think China's changed a lot from the Chinese Revolution in the 1950s with Panda, the Great Panda. But they looked at obviously the bourgeois and the ultra rich. They forced them out into Taiwan, basically, didn't they? The nationalists, and took over and saying, yeah, this is just for the working class. But not quite like that now. You can ask Jack Ma that, or someone else,
right.
Or the owner of Huawei. It's now a trade war between America and corporate America, and really you could say corporate China, but they've guised it under this one party socialist state. I don't know, because I've been to China twice. I don't know if I can call it a communist state, except
it's one party, but it's not socialist. I don't think it's
still communist.
Got a lot of elements of market capitalism, but they want political control.
Yeah,
we're learning to separate those two things, and maybe that's the right pathway.
Yeah, but what I mean is, I don't, because capitalism is. People making money out there, big money. So that's capitalism, isn't it? And that's something that communists don't like. So I can't see how China can call it a communist state, a communist country with that going on. Maybe the way the political system is. Sorry, go on.
Well, you're right. That it's one of the things that young people worry about capitalism is those inequalities, as we call it, that some people are rich and some people are not so rich. But actually, you should welcome that. You should welcome the fact that there's incentives to get ahead by improving other people's lives and taking the reward for that. And we shouldn't worry about billionaires. We should worry about what's the increasing level of quality of life for everybody in the country. And in China, I would say it's not perfect. No system's perfect. But I would say that the numbers indicate that the quality of life and the opportunities for individuals have increased over time. Now, there's still a lot of political control. How do you balance between those things? But capitalism with Chinese qualities, I think that's what they call it, has been good for everybody in China, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the people in China, they don't have an issue with that. It seems like they just get on with it, but it could be maybe the way the regime keeps them quiet. And if you speak against it, you go in jail kind of thing, but they seem to be used to it and accepting of it. Whereas Cuba is slightly different. A lot of people wanted, when I was there, people wanted Castro out, it was like, well, actually it was Hugo Castro that just took over in 2011 when I was there, which I think there was kind of like two different things going on when Obama put the American embassy there. It was like, whoa, the capitalism going to be working now, at least for the bourgeoisie, meaning the kind of middle class small businesses like the bed and breakfast, they call it casas, and classic cars, which now can be souped up, they can import. But then Trump came along and said, no, I want to take this American embassy away and blah, blah, blah. He just really wanted to smash up the new world order that was in the American social science that was developed for world peace after World War II, you know. And, you know, Cuba was one of it after the, you know, so long of, you know, after the Cuban missile, the Cuban missile crisis.
Sure. In 62. But wouldn't you say that Cuba is a good example of where socialism, if that's what you call what they've got there, maybe communism, is not good for the average member
That's
of the
what I mean.
population?
Yeah. So that's what I mean. They were really complaining about it, actually. And yeah, it wasn't great. But yeah, every country has its own sort of complaints about the government in different ways. Because in Philippines, where I spent some time after leaving the fire service, because that's what I was, a firefighter, it would be the government's too corrupt. They're keeping the money and not spending it on hospitals, roads, blah, 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 which obviously is not a good thing to do. But they seem to be getting on with it quite well. But go on. Yeah.
Isn't that the trend, Dave, that the government just gets bigger and bigger? It exerts more and more control. You don't see governments getting smaller anywhere. And then those kinds of problems, whether we call them corruption or bureaucracy or overspending or debt or all of those things, don't we find that that's a government issue? It's not a capitalism issue.
Well, that's exactly what it probably is. I mean, because at the end of the day, I've known lots of people that just want to start a business and just either make money for themselves and live a good life, or actually just make lots of money and, you know, be more than comfortable. You know, so I don't. Show me someone that doesn't want to do that. It was almost like, you know, so that is a form of looking at capitalism as a way to do that, isn't it? It's not, let's be poor all our lives, isn't it? Really? So,
right, exactly.
You know, nobody really tends to veer towards that direction these days anyway. I think it was like that in the 70s because everything was nationalised in the UK anyway. Well, you probably know that as much as me. I was at primary school then, so I don't know how old you are, but, you know, everything was nationalised and even used to get some nice, never used to worry about even getting into student debt or anything like that because it was all subsidised by the government, you know.
Right. I was in the UK in the 70s. I remember that time. And then I remember the 80s when we started getting into denationalising, right?
That's right, yeah.
It was a short time, but it opened up the gates.
Well, it did, yeah. Ronald Reagan and Thatcher really did that and then smashed or put communism to its feet, at least in Russia anyway, the Soviet Union. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, they, you know, Mrs. Thatcher was a supporter of the kind of entrepreneurial economics that we talk about. She wanted to unleash that entrepreneurial spirit, which nationalization had kind of closed down. So I know it was controversial times back then, but I think she and, as you say, Reagan pointed in the right direction. They opened up a lot of opportunities for a lot of people. You know, going back to our theme that we started with, Dave, about people's trust in capitalism, when you look at the research, the positive trust in corporations is low and getting lower. The trust in small business is getting higher. It's in the high 80s, high 90s. So that element of capitalism, that I can be an entrepreneur, I can start my business, I can have a local set of customers that I do well for, that kind of capitalism has still got support. It's the corporations that are losing it.
Yeah. And that is the ones that the socialists actually do like, you know, when you look at the days of when industrialization first started around the time when you start writing about capitalism around the 18th century, isn't it? Then, you know, with Karl Marx writing up the Communist Manifesto, he did say that actually middle classes or small businesses or the small bourgeoisie, as he calls them, were actually fine. You know, it's the bigger ones, you know, and of course when the trade unions come, it was, well, these managers just want money. They're just sending children and women into factories and no health and safety there and blah, 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 you know, that sort of stuff. And it's all about money and capitalism's bad. And just that's where it all came from. But actually, if you look at socialism, it's not a bad thing that small businesses are the ones that are actually doing well, I think.
Yes.
So,
yeah. we have more and more opportunity for small businesses to start. They can build on, big platforms like Amazon or other kinds of platforms. You can download AI from the internet and use it to help your business. So I think we might find a boom in small business coming up, where more and more creative energy of individuals with ideas can be put into practice by building on these big technological platforms. So there's a lot of hope for the future.
Yeah. Well, actually, AI and blockchain technology has actually helped me a lot, actually, with a lot of things, and making me a little bit of money on the side. So it's a bit risky because a lot of it's not regulated. You've just got to be careful out there. But, that's the way the future's going. And then it's starting to get regulated a bit and legitimized, but it will take some time. It reminds me a bit like, say, Russia when the communism did go, and then people were just like, becoming rich, and then you got the oligarchs, just coming from nowhere, from banking and stuff like that, because communism wasn't there. They were free to do whatever they like, and
I hear what you say about less regulation, deregulation. Let people take initiatives that they want to take, and then individuals as customers will decide what works. And I love Bitcoin. I think the whole blockchain revolution of deregulated finance is a huge pointer to a better place in the future.
Yeah, but even Maggie Thatcher, I think she deregulated the banks a bit as well, actually. But they blamed that for the 2008, when the bank, and they were actually going to say that capitalism was going to implode, that's at the austerity, but that didn't happen, of course. But she actually deregulated the banks and caused a recession in the 90s, actually. Well, so they say anyway. I don't think it's just her, actually, but
right.
They reckon that the bank problem in the 2008 was all part of that, and
banks are pretty much eliminated. You got to go with the big banks, and they have, they're high, but the crashes that they can cause are much greater. So
yeah,
I'm not sure.
They'll always have the upper hand. It's a bit like going in a casino. The house will always win. They've got the cash, they've got the control. So whatever happens, and as I say, the SEC, I think it's SEC, have actually allowed Bitcoin to be traded in the stock market now. And probably the other smaller coins now following up between it. But there is a war. There is a war between some of those unregulated brokers and exchanges and things like that. So
yeah, but the market will sort that out. So Bitcoin still seems to be dominant. Ethereum is
Ethereum. That's it. Yeah, exactly.
We're investigating all those other light coins and new coins and so on like that. Let's see what happens. Let's have a free market.
I've made a few $1,000s so far, so I'm not complaining. SEC did me a big favor there, actually. But anyway, okay. Well, we've got to wind this up now. It's actually we've gone well past the 30 minutes, I said. But could you tell our listeners where they can find your book? Any last messages about your book you could say before we go?
So the book title is Aberrant Capitalism. That's the way we pronounce it, Dave. ABERRANT, Capitalism. It's published by Cambridge University Press. You can find it on Amazon or at CU Blog. And we also have a business education program that we call The Value Creators. So thevaluecreators.com, you'll find us there too. So that's buy it on Amazon. That's my best recommendation.
Yeah, great. Well, fantastic. It's great having a conversation with you about this. And we suddenly spun into a little, not debate, but we had a little conversation at the end of, away from the book a bit, my thoughts and your thoughts. I like to pick brains as, people like yourself, experts, and bring it up to date with what's really happened today. Yeah, go on.
It's a big issue between separating politics and economics, and you're an economist, Dave. My motto is 100.
Oh no, I'm not an economist. I'm not an economist. I just
you studied it.
Well, politics. It was politics and society. So, but yeah, economics was part of it. Yeah. So I did study some of it. Yeah.
So I vote for 100% economics and 0% politics. That would be my perfect world.
Right. That would be nice. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Well, Hunter, it's been a great pleasure having this. It's really great having a chat with you. It's a really
you too. Thank you.
Conversation, and thanks a lot for coming and sharing your book with my audience today.
Well, good, and thank you for all you do for keeping us energized and motivated. I think you're great at that.
That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening, and remember, if you want to support what we do, then share, subscribe, and leave a review over on Apple Podcasts. Or head over to my website, davepalmer.com, and click on Rate Show. Well, that's all for now, but I'll see you in the next episode of The Dave Palmer Show.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.